Shaun Haney here with RealAgriculture.com, and I'm joined right now by Ron Bonnett. He is the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, better known as CFA. Ron, how's it going?
Very good. Very good.
So, I don't know where to start with you. There are so many issues that I'm sure right now are on your radar. Are you satisfied with the resolution or the conclusion we've come to on the USMCA?
Well, I think likely it was a deal that had to be struck. I don't think it's any secret some of the supply management commodities are concerned, but I think trying to bring some confidence back into the trading relationship, I think, was critical, and not just for agriculture. The whole economy of Canada and the United States is so tied together that any distortion in that would have impacts on basically everybody. I don't think it's any secret that this administration is likely the most difficult administration there has ever been to work some type of a reasonable trade deal from, and you almost had to step beyond the rhetoric and try and get down to what are some of the key issues that have to be addressed.
So, as a general farm organization, you have members, Ron, that are across the country in all the different sectors. Is it difficult for you? Like, you said that, hey, the dairy sector not very happy, poultry not very happy. Is that difficult inside your group? How do you manage all that? Is that kind of cut right to the?
Well, I described it one time. Being president of a general farm organization is something like sitting on a rail fence and trying to avoid the slivers. But it is difficult. But I think one of the things that has come out of some of the discussion is there is an understanding, I think, on both sides that we do need trade agreements in place to have a set of rules. I think the biggest disappointment with this one is the fact that supply management thought they had everything in the bag when they had the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. And they'd recognized that there was a need to give some market access in order to come up with a deal. And then with the USMCA coming later, it was topping that up. So I think that's the key point of friction with that. But just the fact that we've got all of the different commodities and different provinces sitting around the table at CFA, it is sometimes a balancing act, but I'm a great believer that we're better to have some of those discussions internally than just go out and have sort of a divisive position going forward. If you look at the policies that we develop, whether it's environmental or trade policies, it recognizes the concerns of some of those specific provinces or specific commodities, and we're trying to find that balance. And that's much the same approach any federal government in Canada is going to have to take. They're going to have to find that common ground, and I think we can have a continuing role in helping them find that.
Yeah, trade is one of those topics where there can be divisiveness in the different sectors inside agriculture, but one that I think a lot of agriculture can really rally behind together is how they feel about the federal carbon tax plan. What kind of work has CFA been doing to get more information out or ask the government more questions? Like, where do you stand on it?
Well, the first thing is farmers are the ones that are recognizing the impacts of climate change quicker than anybody else. Carbon tax, cap and trade, I think one of the things that we see happening is more debate about the technique of how you solve a climate change issue rather than looking at what are the issues that have to be addressed. When the carbon tax was announced, we were very quick saying that, look, we need some exemptions for agriculture from the point of view of competitiveness. Some of the announcements have been made. We've got some of the exemptions, not all of them. But I think what's missing in the discussion is how do we make sure that we're doing the best to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and how can we take a look at what we can do to solve some of the carbon issues, everything from waste energy from agricultural products to looking at the bioproduct sector, increased research, looking at innovation. I think agriculture can really be positioned to be a key player in reducing our carbon footprint and everything we produce, but we're not getting enough discussion about that. Yeah. And I think I see disappointing from the political side is that we have politicians looking at a 4-year window as opposed to looking long-term about what are the types of things that need to be done to address climate issues. And as I said, agriculture is likely uniquely positioned to play a role in reducing carbon footprint and providing options to where there's agricultural products used in industrial uses or in the biofuels area.
Some of the largest emitters are going to get exemptions. That's been heavy criticism of that. Does the government understand how agriculture views this, and that the industry overall is constantly trying to figure out how to do things that are environmentally friendly or reduce? Like, we don't want to burn fuel just to burn fuel. Like, you know,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, I sometimes wonder, Ron, if we don't have like a brand issue that agriculture is perceived in a different. I don't know. What is the disconnect?
Well, I think we do have some issues. To give you an example, I had an interview on CBC Radio after the climate change report was announced, and one of the comments they were zeroing in on was eliminating animal agriculture. Well, you really got to take a look.
Sounds practical.
Yeah, it sounds practical. We've been eating animals for 20,000 years. We're going to change that culture in a couple of decades. That's not going to happen. However, if you move the discussion a little further, if we can improve the productivity, reduce the carbon footprint, there's all kinds of things that we could do to ensure that any meat products that we're eating have the smallest carbon footprint as possible. And if you look at the gains that have made on feed conversion rates for all kinds of livestock, that's an example of a very concrete approach to dealing with the carbon issue. And a lot of that's done by research and innovation. So I think it gets back to the point I was making earlier. We've got tied up in discussions about the types of tools that are being used rather than the research and innovation that's necessary to address the climate change issue that's coming forward. And I think that's a lot broader than just agriculture, too.
So I'll ask the question because it's what it seems everybody in media asks when China comes up, is can we do increased trade with China while also not possibly impacting the relationship with the U.S.? And obviously there's the text, the non-market economy text that is in the USMCA, but obviously the U.S. is really very hawkish right now on China. Does that impact how Canada responds to China?
Well, I think one of the things we're doing right now is we're almost doing sector-by-sector negotiations with China. It's not a full-blown trade agreement, and I think likely the best way is to do it that way at this point, rather than try to do a big, broad trade agreement that encompasses everything. I think we've recognized with USMCA and some of the pressure that was coming from the U.S. administration that we've got to continue to diversify our markets. China is one, India is another. I think those developing markets have great potential. I was at a presentation not too long ago where they said in not too long distant future, I think there's going to be 500,000 Chinese with a disposable income equal to somebody from Canada or Australia. So that's a huge market. So we can't ignore that. I think we've got to be conscious, I think, of concerns of the U.S., but I think it's saying something when we've got the agreement in place, and right now we've got a number of cabinet ministers over in China moving forward. So I think it sends a signal that we're not going to be sort of held that we can't explore other trading relationships.
Earlier this week, I talked on Real Ag Radio about how we have a federal election coming up in 2019, whether we like it or not. Yeah. And the reality is an election is a great time for farmers to get their issues in a little bit more into the mainstream and on the mind. When does a politician listen more, Ron, than during an election?
That's when you can get them. But it's interesting you talk about the election coming up. We've had quite a discussion at CFA about what type of approach do we take to this election? Do we get into very hard specifics as we want this program changed and that program changed. And we've decided we're going to take a little bit broader approach this time about making sure that the tools are there to capture the opportunity that agriculture has. We've seen the Barton report, we've seen Industry Canada's report coming out about expanding the potential of agriculture to contribute to our economy. And somehow or another, with this election, I think we need to link that not just to the rural members that have a pretty good understanding about what that is, but I think we've got to take that message to urban candidates who may not realize just how much agriculture contributes to the Canadian economy, and sort of build that support so that when we do have the specific ask, there's an understanding of why we need those tools.
So going into this 19 election, you see it more as an educational opportunity for voters in Canada to understand what agriculture's concerns or issues are, as opposed to here's our 4 things that we need from the next government?
Yeah, because I think it answers the why if we do it that way. If we go in and say, here you've got a huge component of the Canadian economy with great potential to expand. Here's what it means in your community for jobs and economic growth. However, there may be some things that are blocking our progress, and that might be regulatory realignment. It may be support programs that be another thing. But at least when we go in to ask for specific program changes or policy changes, there's an understanding that it doesn't just impact at the farm level. That impacts right through the whole economy of Canada. And I think it's building that type of support necessary, because otherwise, if you just go in there and say, well, we need this and that and the other thing, they're going to say, why? And if we haven't done that groundwork ahead of time, it's going to be a battle till the next election.
So take us behind the scenes here a little bit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So heading into something like the election we're going to have, is there opportunities to speak to all 3 of the major parties and educate them, or how does that work? Like, how does CFA go about talking about some of those broad issues?
It's a combination. At the national level, we'll have an approach at the national level, talking to some of the party leaders, the ag ministers and critics, to give them an idea of what is going on. But all politics is local, so it's about going back through our membership and making sure that they're armed with the information and the tools to go and talk, not just to the candidates in their own riding, but going especially to the candidates in the neighboring urban ridings and starting educating them as well. So it's a dual approach. It's one is at the national level, dealing with party officials, but it's critically important, I think, early in the game, as soon as candidates start to get nominated, to start having those conversations with individual candidates in ridings all across the country.
Well, hey, Ron, this has been great chatting with you. I always love discussing all these issues with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.